Greetings, zombie scholars. Brian again, just want to make a quick check-in, see how things are going. I've really been enjoying the discussions about Romero, both the theme and the character development were excellent discussions. Keep that up as we move into 28 days, 28 weeks in World War Z, really moving into the modern zombie. We're past the origins and the background history for things now. A quick update, 2 quick announcements. First, I've got a survey that I'm conducting this week. It's purely for my own purposes. It's how I can improve the course as we move forward. Believe it or not, we're halfway through the course as it is right now. If you don't mind, the link is at the bottom of this log page. I'll be taking responses for the next 10 days. Just want to know how I can make things even a little bit better. Second, this Wednesday, the proposal is due. I've got some comments about that. Don't freak out. Relax. Also, make one discussion post, your original discussion, for our Module 3 discussion post. It should be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy Module 3's discussion. It's got some relevance, but a really, really fun topic. We've been tracking what the zombie does in these different films, and I do want to make a couple of quick observations. Let's tell them axioms that we have learned so far from watching these zombie films. The first is a pretty obvious one, that even when we looked back in these films through the Haitian Zombie, they really were not about the past, they really were not about the future, they're always about the present. They're about controversies that we face right now, and that's becoming apparent as we look through these more current versions, 28 Days, as we move into The Walking Dead. All of them are about the different things we have going on in our society going on. Second thing about the zombie, we've seen that the zombie figure itself can represent many different things. We've seen it represent slaves, minorities, laborers, capitalists, consumers, even communists, even contradictory subject positions. In other words, the zombie is a rhetorical figure. It consumes everything, even the things that it represents. It's like a horde mindset. All these different zombies, they operate under an idea that they can represent very different things. That means that for each story that we look at, there's a variety of different things being symbolized, and that these stories and symbols for the zombies themselves can have a variety of different meanings, something that we have already begun to see in just our first couple of modules. Third thing that we can take away so far is that these zombie stories, they're really about the survivors. Really, even though the zombie is the main figure, they're about what's going on with the survivors. They represent what's going on in humanity. They represent the problems that we are facing. They're a reflection of how we see human society as we see things in these zombie stories. So I wanted to check through this and give us a kind of update. These are sort of takeaways from our discussion. I can try and synthesize and boil it down to really 3 main points we've discussed at various points through our discussion threads as we're going through now. Now, the other thing I want to do, I want to talk about the final paper, because we're doing the proposal for the final paper. I want to give a check-in and talk about that, and really that's our big assignment for the course, is working towards this final paper. Let me say, first of all, people have asked about models or templates for the final paper. Here's my suggestion. All of the essays that we have read thus far are themselves models or templates, because all of them are academic treatments trying to look for deeper meanings in the films that we're assessing, and what the lessons between these zombie stories or television shows or even graphic novels, what they tell us about the present. Think, for example, the Paffenroth essay we're reading this week, which asks, is the zombie a terrorist? Is the zombie an internal threat? And how does nationalism figure in with all of that? I mean, we already had a number of treatments where we looked at race in Night of the Living Dead. The discussion boards were common on that, and our own readings about white zombie and colonialism. All those are examples of what we're aiming for in the final paper. Think about the Carroll essay that we have this week about infection and disease in 28 Days Later, and the idea of a risk society. All that is asking about the rhetorical implications of all of these zombie movies. Many people have asked, how can we make this more understandable? How can we make this more approachable? Here's my one suggestion. Instead of asking yourself what these stories mean, identify the zombie story you're going to look at and ask yourself, what does it do to the viewers? What's its impact on the viewers? Because that is what we're looking for with the rhetorical force of these stories. Let me go a bit further. Let me tell you about what some students have done in the past for this particular final essay, and maybe that will create some ideas for you thinking about things. It's really, really open, and people have done a variety of different things. You can do any sort of analysis as long as it features some zombie text and tries to figure out what the rhetorical implications are. I had one student who did a really good job of looking at media depictions in zombie films. I'm talking about mass media, I'm talking about journalism. Remember in Night of the Living Dead how there's those cutaways of the television journalist reporting on things that are going on? One student found that really interesting and traced the idea of mass media and journalism through a variety of different zombie films, and argued basically that what these zombie films are telling us is about a change in the mass media and how the mass media relates to us. I had one student that looked at the way sound is used by figures of the zombie, and the idea of these moans or groans, especially in video games, and the impact that that is supposed to have on the viewer or the player. I had another student who picked up the idea of the Creole. Remember the Gillian Phillips reading from our first module about the Creole figure in White Zombie, that of Murder Legendary, and the undeterminable status of his race? Well, they said, okay, we were different from that kind of zombie origin, but this idea of the Creole, the mixed race figure, maybe that's still a part, and actually traced a history of mixed race characters in zombie stories all the way up through modern day. Another student looked at zombie films internationally. There are a number of zombie films that have come out, even some from Africa, especially Nigeria. I had a student who wrote about Nigerian zombie films, which is very interesting because the history of the story was one in which it comes from that Afro-Caribbean religion, and it's a part of the story and the history that goes on there. So it's how those international films were going. So those are some examples of different ways that students have taken those ideas. All of those have one thing in common. They take these zombie stories, whether they're films or graphic novels or television shows or video games, and they try as much as possible to look at these stories as a metaphor or a lesson for the rest of us. They're all pretty narrow. They try and identify a specific film or a specific feature of a zombie and trace it, and they're all trying to assess what we might call the rhetorical implications. Remember those optional readings? They're getting more and more important as we move towards the end of the class. I know several of you used the rhetorical situation when talking about Romero. That's the idea. You might be able to use McGee and the ideograph when talking about 28 days and 28 weeks later. So it's an idea for you to work for things. I hope that clears up some ideas about the final paper. If you do have any questions or any ideas, don't hesitate to contact me. You can reach me through Canvas. You can reach me through email. I'm even holding office hours this week from 10 to noon. You might hit me and I'll be able to respond immediately. We could Skype. We could do other different things to try and get in touch. Don't freak out about it. Remember that the proposal is just a work in progress. Your ideas are going to change. There's going to be revision. You're going to get feedback from Morgan and I, and that feedback is going to change the way that we work towards the final paper. That's the idea. That's the idea, is to try and improve it. Don't think that you could write it right now and it would be 100% solid and have no room for improvement. That's not the goal. The goal is to try and make our thinking evolve as we are working through these ideas. And we're looking for a final paper where you examine the impact of the zombie as a rhetorical figure. So don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions. I look forward to seeing the proposals and going through this next module with you. Happy hunting, scholars!